The reservation was under my name. Table for 6 at Maison Beaumont, the French bistro tucked away on a quiet side street in Yorkville. The kind of place where the waiters remember your wine order, and the candles are real beeswax. I had booked it 8 weeks in advance. I had called personally to confirm the private alcove by the window, the one with the view of the maple tree, that was just starting to turn gold because it was the second week of October, and Toronto was doing that thing it does, where the air smells like wood smoke and the sidewalks are already slick, fallen leaves. I was wearing the deep green dress my mother had given me 2 Christmases ago, before the chemotherapy stopped working. I had on her pearl earrings. My hair was pinned up the way she used to do it for me when I was a girl, and I had rehearsed my smile in the bathroom mirror of our house in Rosedale for a full 20 minutes before I ordered the Uber. 15 years. That was what the dinner was supposed to celebrate. 15 years of marriage to the man who, 6 weeks ago, had stood in our kitchen and told me he was taking on extra shifts at the hospital because the new residency program needed senior supervision. 15 years, and I had planned everything. The private room. The vintage champagne from the year we got married. The custom cake from that bakery on Queen West that my husband always said was the only one in the city that did it properly. The table was set for 6. My husband. Me. His brother and his brother's wife, the woman I had called my sister-in-law for 14 years, and who I had, for most of those years, loved like the sister I never had. And 2 of our oldest friends, Dr. Henderson and his wife Jeanine, who had been at our wedding and who had watched our daughter be baptized at St. Michael's Cathedral. I sat down at 7:02 p.m. The reservation was for 7. By 7:15, the maitre d' had poured me a glass of sparkling water and asked, with the particular gentleness that service staff in this country reserve for women who are clearly holding something together, if I would like to wait a little longer before ordering. Yes, please, I said. They're just running a bit behind, I'm sure. My phone sat face down on the white linen. I did not need to check it. I already knew. I knew because 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be at a conference in Montreal but had come home early because of a migraine, I had walked into our bedroom looking for my husband's iPad to use the hotspot, and I had found a notification from a messaging app he had sworn to me, just 2 months before, that he had deleted. I knew because I had sat on the edge of our bed and read 6 months of messages between him and my sister-in-law. 6 months of I love you more every day. 6 months of when we finally tell them. 6 months of a plan. A plan about the cottage on Georgian Bay that my parents had left me. A plan about the RRSP we had built together. A plan about our daughter, Claire, who was 14 years old and had her father's eyes and her aunt's laugh. I had not said a word. I had closed the iPad. I had taken a very hot shower. I had called my migraine into my office and extended the leave by 2 more days. And then I had done what my father, a tax lawyer in Ottawa for 31 years before he died, had always told me to do when the ground starts shifting under your feet. I got organized. At 7:22, the young server came back to my table. He was maybe 24, with dark curly hair and the kind of open, observant face that people underestimate. His name tag said Daniel. He had been the one to take our reservations twice before, when my husband and I had come here for quieter dinners, and he had always remembered that I preferred the Chardonnay from the Niagara Peninsula rather than the French white that my husband always ordered. Madame, he said, and then he paused, and I could see him calculating whether to say what he wanted to say. He set down the bread basket. He topped up my water. Then, without quite meeting my eyes, he said, "Would you like me to bring you something from the kitchen while you wait? The chef has prepared a little amuse-bouche tonight. It would be our pleasure." "Thank you, Daniel," I said. "That would be lovely." He hesitated. Then he said, very quietly, "Would you like to move to a smaller table? Sometimes, in the dining room, it feels less exposed." I looked up at him. He was not looking at me with pity. He was looking at me the way one person looks at another when they have decided, for reasons of their own, to do something kind. "The window table is fine," I said. "Thank you." He nodded once and walked away. At 7:31, my phone buzzed. I turned it over. It was a text from my husband. "Hey, so sorry, got pulled into an emergency consult. Probably going to be a late one. Rain check on the dinner? Love you. Happy anniversary." A minute later, another text. From my sister-in-law. I am so sorry, I'm not going to make it. Migraine from hell. Your brother-in-law says happy anniversary, he got called in to cover a shift at the firm. Love you, we'll celebrate properly next weekend. I set the phone down. I took a sip of sparkling water. My hand was completely steady. Then I opened the app on my phone that connected to the small camera I had installed in the ceiling fan of our guest bedroom 11 days ago. The camera that my husband did not know about. The camera that I had installed after I spent an afternoon at the office of Katrina Osei, a family lawyer in Toronto who had been recommended to me by one of my oldest friends from McGill, a woman I had not spoken to in 8 years until I called her from a Tim Hortons parking lot at 6 a.m. and told her, in the flat voice of a person who has not yet decided whether to cry, that I needed help. The camera feed was live. The timestamp read 7:33 p.m. My husband's car was in our driveway. My sister-in-law's car was there too. I could see them in the kitchen, through the angle of the hallway camera, which I had also installed. She was laughing at something. He handed her a glass of wine. She kissed him. In our kitchen. On our 15th anniversary. With a bottle of the Barolo my father had given us for our 10th. I closed the app. I took another sip of water. At 7:40, Daniel returned with a small white plate. On it was a single oyster, dressed with a green apple mignonette, and beside it a tiny crostini with smoked trout and creme fraiche. From the chef, he said. Thank you. He lingered. Then he said, Madame, the chef wanted me to mention, if you would like to speak with the manager at any point tonight, she is available. Sometimes, she said, guests appreciate knowing that. I looked up. Something in his tone had shifted. Not pity. Something more like a door being held open. Daniel, I said. Can you sit down for a moment? He glanced around. The restaurant was busy, but not packed. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat on the edge of it. Did you know this dinner was not going to happen? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Madam, I don't want to cause any trouble. You won't be causing trouble. I'm asking you a direct question. He looked at his hands. Then he said, Your husband came in 2 weeks ago. He made a reservation for a different date. A different time. With a different woman. He asked us to confirm, if anyone called, that he had been at the hospital that night, and that we had a record of it. He offered the maitre d' $200. I see. I heard. I was rolling silverware at the next station. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place. But when I saw your reservation tonight, and I recognized the name, and then the others didn't come. He trailed off. I'm very sorry. Did the maitre d' take the money? No, madame. We do not do that here. He told your husband we could not help him and asked him to find another restaurant. I smiled at Daniel. A real smile, for the first time that evening. Thank you, I said. For telling me. He stood up. Is there anything I can get for you? Yes. Please bring me the tasting menu. The full 7 courses. And the pairing. And in about an hour. Please bring out the cake I ordered. With all 15 candles lit. He nodded. Of course, madame. And Daniel. One more thing. When the cake comes, I would like you to sit with me while I blow out the candles. If that is permitted. He smiled for the first time. I will make it permitted. He walked away, and I picked up the oyster. It tasted like the Atlantic. It tasted like a tide turning. The next 2 hours were the best meal I had eaten in a year. Between the 3rd and 4th courses, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Katrina Osei. I told her it was time. She said she would file in the morning. The second was to a forensic accountant named Richard Chow, whom my lawyer had recommended, and who had been quietly mapping my husband's financial movements for 6 weeks. I told him to send everything he had to the lawyer's office by end of day tomorrow. He said it was already done. The third was to my daughter, Claire, who was at a sleepover at her best friend's house in Forest Hill. I told her I loved her. I told her I was having a lovely dinner. I told her that tomorrow we were going to have a long conversation, and that whatever happened, she was the most important person in my world, and that I was not going anywhere. She asked, in the way 14-year-olds ask things, Mom, are you okay? I am wonderful, sweetheart, I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. When the cake came, Daniel sat across from me, and a small group of the kitchen staff gathered near the pass, and the chef herself, a woman named Eloise with flour on her apron, stepped out to watch. 15 candles. I made a wish. I blew them all out on the first try. The staff clapped. I cut the first slice and gave it to Daniel. At 10:47 p.m., I paid the bill. I tipped Daniel 40%. I walked out into the October night with my coat over my arm and my phone in my hand, and I ordered a car to the airport hotel where I had booked a room 3 weeks ago under my maiden name. By midnight, my husband had called me 14 times. My sister-in-law had called 6. I did not answer. At 1:17 a.m., my phone lit up one more time. It was a text from my husband. "Where are you? Your car is not home. I'm worried." I read it. I did not reply. I put the phone on the hotel bedside table, and I slept for 9 hours, which was the first real sleep I had had in half a year. The next morning, at 9:00 a.m., sharp, Katrina Osei filed for divorce on my behalf. She cited adultery. She attached, under seal, the evidence my accountant had compiled. The joint account transfers to a numbered company in Ontario registered in my sister-in-law's maiden name. The 3 withdrawals from my RRSP that my husband had authorized by forging my signature. The Airbnb receipts in Collingwood that aligned perfectly with the weekends he had told me he was at medical conferences in Calgary. She also filed a separate motion to freeze the joint line of credit. All of this was done before my husband had finished his morning coffee. At 9:43 a.m., my mother-in-law called me. I had not expected that. I picked up. "Dear," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I just got a call from our family lawyer. Is it true? What my son has done?" "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your father-in-law and I are driving down from Kingston right now. We will be at your house by 1 o'clock. We would like to see our granddaughter. And we would like, if you will let us, to stand with you." I was sitting by the window of the hotel room. The sun was coming through the curtains. Outside, a streetcar rang its bell. "I would like that very much," I said. She paused. "The cottage on Georgian Bay. He told us, years ago, that it was in both your names. Your father left it to you, didn't he? Only to you? Only to me. And our grandmother's brooch. The sapphire one. I gave it to him to give to you on your 10th anniversary. He told us you cherished it." I closed my eyes. "He has it in the safe deposit box at the bank. Along with other things. I have never worn it, because he told me it was too valuable and we should save it for Claire." "Good," she said. Her voice was harder now. "Good. Keep it safe. It was always meant for you and Claire. Always." When my in-laws arrived that afternoon, my father-in-law, a retired engineer with the quiet sturdiness of a man who had spent his life building bridges, hugged me in my own front hallway and said, "Whatever you need, from us, from the family, you have it. I am ashamed of what my son has done. I am ashamed of what my niece has done. They are both our blood, and they have dishonored themselves." His niece. I had never thought about it in quite that way. My sister-in-law was my father-in-law's niece, the daughter of his younger sister in Halifax. She had married my husband's brother 11 years ago. I had been the maid of honor at their wedding. I had held her hand when she lost her first pregnancy. I had lent her money when her yoga studio had almost folded. She had been calling me her sister for 14 years. My brother-in-law, her husband, arrived at our house separately, an hour after his parents. He looked like a man who had been hit by a bus. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she had kissed my husband the night before, and he put his head in his hands and cried. Then he said, "I found out 3 hours ago. She's gone." She packed a suitcase and left. "I think she went to him." "She did," I said. I showed him the camera feed from that morning. My husband, in our house. Letting her in with a suitcase at 7:15 a.m. My brother-in-law looked at the screen for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I swear to God I had no idea." "I know you didn't," I said. The next 3 months moved faster than anyone expected. Because Katrina had filed first, and because the evidence was overwhelming, my husband's lawyer advised him to settle quickly rather than go to trial. I got the house in Rosedale. I got the cottage, which had always been mine anyway. I got primary custody of Claire. I got the full value of the RRSPs that had been drained, paid back with interest, along with a portion of his future earnings as compensation for the financial deception. The numbered company that he and my sister-in-law had set up was dissolved by court order. And the assets inside it, nearly $400,000 that had been skimmed from our joint accounts over 2 years, were returned to me. My brother-in-law filed for divorce a week after I did. He kept the condo. He kept the dog. My sister-in-law, who had been counting on a financial cushion from my husband, discovered very quickly that my husband's financial cushion no longer existed. They rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Etobicoke. They fought, I heard, constantly. Within 4 months, she had moved out. My husband lost his senior supervisory position at the hospital, not because of the affair, which was none of his employer's business, but because during the discovery process it came out that he had, on 3 occasions, falsified his on-call records to cover his absences. The medical board opened an investigation. His license was suspended for 18 months. He appealed. He lost. I did not gloat. I did not post anything on social media. I did not tell our friends what had happened beyond the basic fact that we were divorcing. I simply went on with my life. I went back to work. At the architectural firm in the Distillery District where I had been a partner for 9 years. I took Claire to her volleyball tournaments. I made sure her homework was done. I slept, for the first time in so long. All the way through the night. In the spring, I went back to Maison Beaumont for dinner. By myself, this time by choice. Daniel was still there, he was now the head server. I asked him if he would like to come work for me, in a sense. I had started a small foundation, using some of the settlement money, that funded bursaries for hospitality students at George Brown College. I asked him if he would serve on the advisory board. He said yes. In the summer, Claire and I drove up to the cottage on Georgian Bay. It was the first time we had been there without my husband in 15 years. The first evening, we sat on the dock and watched the sun set over the water, and Claire, who had grown 3 inches in the last year, and was starting to look unnervingly like my mother, leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Mom, I'm really proud of you." I did not cry. I had done my crying, most of it privately, over the winter. I just put my arm around her and said, "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. And I'm proud of us." We ate dinner on the screened porch. My father-in-law had sent up a crate of Niagara wine as a housewarming gift of sorts. My mother-in-law had sent a quilt she had made herself. Inside the quilt, pinned to one of the squares, was the sapphire brooch. Her grandmother's brooch. With a note that read, "This was always meant for you. Pass it to Claire when she is ready. With love, from your mother-in-law, who is so very glad you are still our family." I wore the brooch to my daughter's high school graduation 3 years later. She wore it to her own wedding, when she was 26. To a kind young man who was a carpenter in Guelph, and who called my father-in-law Grandpa from the moment he was introduced to him. My ex-husband remarried briefly, a woman he met during his licensing reinstatement hearings. That marriage ended in 2 years. My former sister-in-law moved back to Halifax, where her family is from. I have not seen her since the day before the dinner at Maison Beaumont. I do not think of her often. When I do, it is without anger. She simply became, over time, a person who had once been in my life, and then was not. The way a dress you once loved stops fitting, and you give it away. People sometimes ask me, when the subject comes up, how I knew to prepare so carefully. How I managed not to scream, not to throw the Barolo across the kitchen, not to confront them in the moment. The truth is simpler than they expect. My mother, before she died, told me something I think about almost every day. She said, "When you find out that someone you love has betrayed you, you will have a choice. You can let the betrayal be the loudest thing about the rest of your life. Or you can let your response to it be the loudest thing. The response is the only part you actually get to choose." I chose my response. I chose to eat a beautiful meal by a window in a restaurant where the candles were real beeswax. I chose to let a kind young man bring me a cake with 15 candles on it. I chose to walk out into an October night with my dignity in my coat pocket, and my future in my phone, and a daughter waiting for me who was going to need a mother who knew how to stand up straight. The table was set for 6. Only one person sat down at it that night. That was enough. It was, as it turned out, more than enough.